So with last week's class, we saw about what are the various type of piping layouts for sanitation. And then we had a brief discussion on recycling. So today what we would be covering would be the primary, secondary and tertiary wastewater treatment. And the following that would be sewage treatment plant. We'll do it in the next class. The treatment with the collection well, treatment, grey water, BOD, biochemical oxygen demand, recycling, that we'll look into. Application on the campus, we can look into, we have a layout of application in a residential plot. So we can have an interpretation of the scheme. Sewer line gradient, leach pits, traps, manhole inspection chamber, septic tank. Again, septic tank will be repeated, that we'll do in the next class. Understanding size and construction of wastewater pipes. Sewer line fixtures, septic tanks, again traps for the septic tanks. Traps we already did for last class because it was one of the important content when we had to do the pipe distribution. So house drainage principles, traps, flow trap, multi-trap. So we'll look into all of these. Pretty much, I think the layout, design and detail of sewage and drainage system, there are guidelines given on how the layout to be done for a simple residential building. So we'll go through that also. Bylaws and others, the water fixtures, we can look into the next class. So you guys are already familiar with one treatment process. What is it? Which we have already completed. And this is the second treatment process in the subject. What is that we have already completed, guys? We're going to use pretty much the same terminology as what we used for the first one. Can anyone of you recall? Well, what is the first unit deals with? This is a treatment process which we already completed. What is it? Taking an answer. You guys don't remember? You haven't heard of anything as a treatment from the earlier classes? What is the first unit content is all about? Guys, this is really bad now. You don't remember what we are the second unit and you're not able to give an answer for this. What is that you guys been listening for all these days? None of you are coming up with an answer. What has been going on in the classes all these days for building services?
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, in first chapter we covered water treatment and disposal system.
Yes. That is what I've been asking. What is the first unit? First unit is all about what are the sources of water, what is the quality of water required for a potable with the guidelines, and then what is the water treatment required for a ideal water. Normally the water available from the nature, we can't use it directly because of all the suspended particles. So we have to go through water treatment. So in that we would have gone through about pretty much the same, the primary, secondary and tertiary treatment, and then it would be taken for usage. Then it goes on to the pumping, storage and distribution, and then we use it. So this unit 2, here we are speaking about the various sanitation methods. That is the sewage disposal, and now we have come to sewage treatment. Again, here in the sewage treatment, we do use a pretty much same terminologies as a earlier treatment: primary, secondary, and tertiary. And there is one other classification. Normally, what we call it as physical treatment, chemical treatment, and biological treatment. Okay, so these three, physical, chemical, and biological, would be the pre-treatment process, which is to be described broadly. Under the three category, there's another set of categorization can be done, which is the same process. I'll tell you. Here on the sub, we'll go into preliminary, primary, secondary, tertiary. Again, there's another subdivisions will come up. So we go into the contents for today. Okay. So here, this page gives you an explanation of what is the wastewater. You guys able to see this presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this page gives you a introduction to what is the wastewater, and here you have mentions about what are the types of wastewater, where all it is being used. Have you heard of this term called sullage? You can see on the second line of this page, sullage. You guys would have definitely heard of sewage. Sullage is nothing but, in the last class, if you remember, I was telling you about water recycling. Water from the water closet or urinals would be taken as for, which is a human waste. It's primarily considered to be the sewage or black water. And water from the domestic use, anything apart from the water closet and the urinal, would be considered as a grey water, which in turn can be called as sullage. So this is what the definition which are given here. So beyond it, there's nothing much here. And the important part is, we are not only considering, when we are speaking of sewage, we are not only considering residents. Sewage water comes from homes, businesses, hospitals, schools, and other institutions. This usually requires a higher level of water treatment. The main focus of a wastewater treatment plant is reduce of BOD, which is important term, biochemical oxygen demand, and the chemical oxygen demand in the effluent discharge to natural waters. So a quick introduction which you definitely need to understand about this is, we look into what is BOD. Biochemical oxygen demand. BOD is nothing but, in water, there is a little quantity of dissolved oxygen present there. So what is basically a biochemical oxygen demand is, in a sewage water or a sullage water, there will be some particle which needs to go through which goes through a decomposition, and usually that's when the bacteria come into effect, which comes in and which disintegrates them. For the bacteria to thrive, they are going to use up the oxygen from the water. There is a stipulated quantity of oxygen need to be present in the water all times. If this quantity of oxygen goes back, reduces, then the water quality also takes a very adverse effect. So what we are doing is, when there is always content which is going to be decomposing, which needs to be taken care of, then it needs to have one is sufficient amount of oxygen, or in the treatment process, we have to make sure this decomposition process doesn't take too long. So what we do is we use chemicals to kill these bacteria initially so that the decomposition doesn't take place in the water, and the substance, whatever substance that is left to be removed from the water, is removed through physical filtration process. The example of this would be to understand a better understanding of if you have looked into ponds or lakes which are not being taken care of, you'll be seeing a very green color, probably a very strong stench also would be coming out from the water body, wherein it's not in a condition to be used at all. So here, what happened is the biological oxygen demand, biochemical oxygen demand is gone down rapidly because of the bacteria and the decomposition process, which is constantly going on in that place. So that's when we look into, we say that we require to have a constant maintenance of the water bodies. So this is what biochemical and chemical oxygen demand basically is all about. And why are we getting to know about this is, in a wastewater treatment plant, the primary function is to reduce the contents which is going to reduce the oxygen, which is the bacteria, going to do a treatment where this breaking down process doesn't happen for a long time, and the water is completely in a safer condition wherein the bacteria is taken care of, as well as the physical material which is supposed to be decomposing is also removed. You guys are clear? You have any doubts in this? If at all you want to have much more better clarity on what is BOD, you can search it online. You'll be able to get a lot of resources on the same. But to make it easier, I gave you an explanation. So the main focus of wastewater treatment plant is to reduce the biochemical oxygen demand and the chemical oxygen demand in the effluent discharged natural water. So what exactly we would be expecting in a wastewater? Guys, I need your participation. What are the contents we would be expecting? Human excreta, which is the primary. Then chemicals and detergents, oils from probably coming from our kitchen waste. But what are the other serious contents which could be present in a sewage?
Plastic.
Plastic directly doesn't go into the sewage, or probably can get into the stormwater or something. Yes, plastics is one. Okay. Beyond that, what else? As I told you, we are not looking into sewage disposal or sewage treatment only for residents. We have other industries, institutions.
Chemicals from the industries, wastage.
Yes, chemicals from the industries, hospitals. Primarily, any of these industries, even hospitals, before they can't directly dump in, because a few industries which has quite a hazardous effluence, the sewage from them. So what they have to do is they have to go through a primary treatment, and then only it can be taken into the sewage treatment plant, as in like the city's sewage line. Similarly, hospitals, because they again might have a very sensitive effluent from them, so they also have to go through a process. So it can be it can be of organic waste also. It could be plants. It could be of a meat from any of the food we eat. So these all need to be taken into consideration. So what exactly is a wastewater treatment plant is? It is designed to function as a microbiology farm. This is a plant where the bacteria and other microorganisms are fed oxygen and organic waste. See, there are two things here. Naturally occurring bacteria, when they are in the sewage line, will definitely lose the the oxygen content in the water. That's what we said about BOD. Wherein this bacteria and microorganisms used in the plant are used as the very stipulated period, and the function of them is to disintegrate the solids. So this process is comparatively better, wherein in a sewage line, when it comes through the process, we don't have a fixed period, and the quality of water going back is on a very high note there. Wherein here, it is done all in a controlled environment. On the other hand, wastewater may contain pathogenic and potentially pathogenic microorganisms, which pose as a threat to public health, which is what I said about hospital waste industries. Waterborne and water-related disease caused by pathogen microbes are among the most serious threats to public health. As I told you, these contents can't be directly thrown into the sewage, as they have to go through primary treatment and then only they will be sent off. So usual water treatment involves collecting the wastewater in central and segregated locations, subjecting to the wastewater. These are, I'll share this content so that you can have a full reading. But what I'm going to do in this presentation, I'm going to give a gist of each of these pages so that you can have a reading separately later. So the water treatment used to be of two conditions. Earlier conditions were the wastewater is collected in one place and then they would be treated and would be disposed of. But now, in the current conditions and the earlier after the earlier days, when the water sewage disposal is way too much, it has become a continuous process wherein like the water is not collected as stagnated, but it's become a continuous flow, and the treatment happens on a periodical note. They are given of the various process: vacuum filtration, storage or removal of sludge, addition of chemicals, filters, removal, disposal. These are categories. Okay, before this presentation, I'll just quickly show you one overview of a treatment process so that you'll be able to understand these conditions much easily. You guys are able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is a very generic and a very basic representation of what is the treatments happening. So on to the extreme left is the treatment center, the sewage treatment center, sewage treatment plant, what you can call, where the sewage water is first going through a screening stage. A screening stage is nothing but a grid or a mesh layer where all the physical particles are removed and the water has been sent off. On the primary treatment stage, again, this could be about the physical separation and oxygenation of ozone content, supplying to ozone. See, oxygenating is different from the ozone. An oxygen's atom is 0 O2. For ozone, it is O3. We look into what is the function of ozone particles in the treatment. And then it goes through a secondary treatment stage where it might be going through a chemical treatment of chlorination. It could be of another treatment of coagulation also, wherein the minute particles, other than the physical content removed from the screening, the minute particles using a coagulant, where all of these minute contents can be bound together and they can be removed after they form a mass. And the final treatment stage could be of a UV ray treatment to remove or kill the pathogens, bacteria in them, on to a last stage, and then it is sent or disposed through a natural water body. It could be used for any other various purposes which I would be listing out. So understand this. This is what we are primarily removing the physical content initially, and then working on the chemical and the biological aspect of the water. So with this layout, have this layout in your back understanding. So now when we are looking into this content, the theoretical part, you will have a better understanding. Okay. So as I told you, primarily there are three processes which we classify as physical, chemical, and biological wastewater treatment. So physical, sedimentation or clarification, which is let it to slow down or calm down, wherein the contents either float or they settle down. Screening, which is a physical filter to remove the waste. Aeration is oxygen supplied to that so the water quality improves. Filtration could be a sand filter where the water is removed of the minute suspended particles. Floating or skimming is pretty much done in the sedimentation part. Skimming is nothing but removing the waste from the suspended waste from the top. Degasification is removal of gas from the content. So equalization is maintaining, probably the water output could be acidic or a base, to bring in add-on chemicals to make it normal, neutral level. So in the chemical process, we have chlorination. Later on, you'll see chlorination is one process where the chlorination, adding chlorination, kills the bacteria and which stops the biochemical oxygen demand. So chlorination can be used in multiple stages, not in just one. Next is ozonation. As I told you, ozone, O3. Neutralization is pretty much similar to equalization, about getting the water pH value. Coagulation, absorption, ion exchange. Ion exchange is not in many places they are used, but wherein like it's segregated to the positively charged and the negatively charged ions. Biological is primarily divided into two. Aerobic is in the contact presence of oxygen. Anaerobic is not in the presence of oxygen. So actuators as sludge treatment method, trickling filtration, oxidation ponds, lagoons, aerobic digestion are part of aerobic. Anaerobic digestion, septic tanks and lagoons are another process. So this here, whatever contents which are going to follow in the remaining slides is going to be a quick overview. We are not getting into the detailed aspect because the content, what we need to know is what are the important steps we'll be following through. And then you need to, because water treatment is one of the important 16-mark questions, you please understand what is the illustration required for it. There is not one single illustration which is right. You have multiple illustration, but the intent of the illustration should be to deliver the process and to give the correct layout. So in this, we'll just quickly run through and we complete the process. In the physical method includes no gross chemical or biological changes. Okay. So as I told you, this would be a screening method to remove the large estuarine objects. In the process of sedimentation, physical phenomena relating to the settling of solids by gravity are allowed to operate. So sedimentation is also we have looked into. So this is one example of our wastewater treatment here is. In this process, it's explained about the coagulation, what happens in a coagulation. Water from the coagulation comes in and then it passes through multiple filters and then the water is taken out. The filter will remove the solid suspended particles. Or the coagulation can lead into the waste being settling down, and hope you can see there is a tapered bottom in this tank on the top, where the sludge or the waste gets segregated and it flows into the lowest point where it is again taken out through the sludge removal. Sedimentation is the most common physical treatment process. Similarly, aeration is also another important process. Adding air usually to provide oxygen to the wastewater. Next, I speak about the filtration mediums, the soil filtration mediums. And this part again, I told you, in the sedimentation process, usually the contents settle down and it is removed. Whereas like permitting greases in the sedimentation process, as the water, the contents, the sewage is being on a stable condition, the greases and the oils tend to float on the top. So these can be removed by skimming. The industrial waste comparatively at times after the treatment also might contain a very highly strong effluent content, the sewage content in it. So what happens is when it is being sent directly, it might affect the plant, the sewage treatment plant itself, or the equipment. So what they do is they periodically mix it with the normal sewage so that the concentration of the chemicals reduces and then it is taken out from the, or this is the process called equalization and then sent to the treatment plant. Here, our aeration happens is what it's been shown. Aeration, nothing but a floating platform will be there where the water is taken from the bottom, rushed, thrown out as like a spray, and this spray absorbs the oxygen from the, it doesn't absorb, it takes in the oxygen from the atmosphere and brings it back. Another type, this is a float where the ring floats, it works onto the spiraling vertically up. Another one type of float which does the same process is called the paddle float. Chemical treatment consists of chemical reactions, sometimes improves the water quality. Chlorination is one of the important and the most commonly used chemical treatment process. Chlorine, a strong oxidizing chemical, is used to kill bacteria and to slow down the rate of decomposition of the wastewater. The bacteria killed is such when the vital biological processes are affected by the chlorine. As I told you, if the bacteria is going to be working on the solid waste through the process, the journey of the sewage, then the BOD needs to be taken care of. The biochemical oxygen demand goes down very badly and the water quality also goes down. Another strong oxidizing agent that has been also used as oxidizing disinfectant is ozone, O3. The chemical process commonly used in many industrial wastewater treatment operations is neutralization. Neutralization consists of addition of acids or base to adjust the pH level back to neutrality. Coagulation we have already looked into. So our coagulation happens is moves the dirt and suspended particles. Here the water onto the left is the water from a water source comes in. The central housing system introduces the coagulant content and later this coagulant content mixes up and then the solids are then taken towards sedimentation. What happens is when the coagulants work on, they tend to bind as masses and during the process of sedimentation, these masses settle down and removed out as sludges. So this is the ion exchange process. Certain processes may actually be physical and chemical in nature. The use of activated carbon to absorb or remove organic, for example, both chemical and physical. The process such as ion exchange, which involves exchanging certain ions for others, are not used in great extent in water treatment. As I told you about the freshly positively charged ions and the negatively charged ions. So this page gives you what are the advantages of chlorination and what all things it does. So one important point to be mentioned here is the first line. This is a method of treatment which has been employed for many purposes in all stages of wastewater, or even prior to the preliminary treatment. Another advantages of important points is removes the odor from the sewage. Protection of plant structure. The plant structure, what they speak about is not the plants we look into. It's about the sewage treatment plant. The aid in plant operation, which is again the equipment what they use in the sewage treatment, because these things tend to neutralize and control the bacterial growth. Sedimentation, trickling filter, activated sludge bulking. So what happens is these processes all require content which doesn't have any bacterial input to them. So that's what it meant. Reduction or delay in biochemical oxygen demand, which we've been repeatedly looking into. Last point is also quite important. Among the most common is the use of ozone in view of toxicity of the chlorine and chlorinated compound for fish as well as living form. Oxygenation may be more commonly used in the future. Chlorine being a chemical, definitely causes harmful effects on the after treatment of the water. So oxygenation is a much more efficient method and which can be used further in the future. The only reason why it's not being used now is the amount of technology is there, but it needs additional working load on the formation of oxygenation, ozone content, and hence it is not being widely used. So the oxygen into ozone occurs with the use of energy. This is what I was saying. This requires an additional set of energy for the formation, and hence it's not widely used. This process is carried out by electrical discharge field as an ozone generator or by ultraviolet radiation with the UV type ozone generator. So how this process works here is the oxygen molecules O2 are split into individual oxygen atoms. In this state, the oxygen is very unstable, so it joins the oxygen molecule to form O3, which is ozone. It is toxic to most waterborne microorganisms because ozone gas is also unstable. It cannot be packed or stored, must be generated on site and mixed by bubble contact. So this point is going to be a quite important point. The ozone, as we looked into the various types of effluents present in the wastewater, the solid effluents, plants, plastics, chemical effluents, there are metal contents also. So what happens is using ozone, it oxides the metal content in the water, like iron, manganese, and sulfur, which are harmful. So when they come in contact with ozone, they oxidize and become a particle. Then they are removed through filtration. So ozone has many advantages as a disinfectant. It kills all the pathogenic organisms by direct effect of their DNA. Disinfection with ozone occurs 30 times faster than that of chlorine. So this is how ozonation treatment process happens. Air oxygen is fed into a tank where it's split and the ozone is generated. Then with the use of pumps, it is passed on to the water, and then there it reacts and removes. It forms oxides of the metals as well as kills bacteria. The disadvantage of ozone disinfection system includes corrosive nature, a high cost for the initial setup, and a high electricity consumption. Biological treatment method uses microorganisms such as bacteria, which has already been mentioned. So you can go through this part. So how the bacteria work on them and to disintegrate the organic particles and remove them. Now, as I told you, the primary categorization of 3. Physical treatment. For a sewage treatment, there are 3 treatments. So that is one way of grouping them. Physical treatment, chemical treatment, and biological treatment. And it can be subcategorized, as I told you earlier, into 6 other methods, which is preliminary treatment, primary, secondary, disinfection, sludge, and tertiary. They are no different at all, except earlier we categorized through the functions of physical or chemical or biological. Here the same content is taken through. What happens in a preliminary is it takes in the filtration, the screening process. Then primary again, which goes into the sedimentation process. Secondary is the biochemical process of digestion. Sludge removal comes in the later process. So the content is pretty much the same, except here it is subcategorized based on the functions of each of them. So they are no different. The only condition awareness needs to be given here is understanding each of these processes on the mechanisms. So this is a industrial process. You don't need to take this as an example. Tertiary or the advanced treatment is to describe following the secondary. It is about water treatment and it is for the better quality of water. Like something like a UV and all would be taken in the tertiary treatment for the final treatment, after which it goes into the water body. This filtration process. We don't need to look into this process. Reverse osmosis is not much used in the wastewater treatment, but whereas in the advanced countries, yes, even a backwater is treated and used as a potable. They are brought into a potable condition, but in our country, we have not still done that. So what happens is, to have achieved that, they use reverse osmosis technology at the last. Nanofiltration is again one of the primary, which is a tertiary treatment. So wetlands. So yeah, now we are speaking about water treatment plants, which is going through all this physical, chemical, and biological process. So what has been happening earlier? How nature was doing the same job for wastewater treatment. So that's why we speak about the wetlands. Recognize the ability of the scientists have long recognized the ability of wetlands to purify water through the correct sequence of the base media, plant species, and micro species. Constructed wetlands can successfully reduce the nitrogen content, filter out solids, and reduce the presence of heavy metals. I'll quickly show you a representation of how a wetland construction is going to be. Or represent an illustration of wetland. You guys are able to see the screen? So here, the water is entering. The water again is removed into, it can be segregated into black water and grey water. The grey water is taken out separately. At times, it will be put into both the use. Then the primary treatment, where the content is left to sit down. And this settling part. So what happens is, even in the black water, all these suspended particles goes down and settle down as a sludge. What you can see as a black portion here. And if at all there are any other contents also, will settle down. And later on after that, it passes through a filter. It passes through a wetland, which contains plants, gravels to filter out the solid suspended particles. And the trees. Nitrogen is one important component of plant growth. So the plants tend to remove the nitrogen compound from the wastewater, which doesn't have any physically suspended particle. And then it goes through a control box where the water is soaked and it is taken through all the sand particles, which primarily filters out the suspended solids. And then it goes into a plant, and then it is reused or disposed either into another wetland for irrigation, or it can be taken out into a water body. So getting back into the slide. So this slide gives you on what are the effects of the wetland and how it cleans up the process. Okay, because same image, I didn't realize there's another one here. This gives you a much more clear picture. It's quite big. Same process wherein I've taken out the image alone. This picture gives you an illustration of the primary water treatment, which I said about how the primary treatment goes off. So raw sewage is going through screening. Then a commuter is where it is a place which compresses all the physical particles. So it becomes small, broken down into smaller particles. Then a grit chamber. Grit chamber is nothing but like a mesh. And it's got soil or sand where the water is put in. and the grid disposal, all the small suspended particles goes through the grid disposal. And primary clarifier or sedimentation process. It goes through a sedimentation tank, where again at the bottom, if you can see raw or primary sludge, that's where the sedimented particles after the sedimentation, it goes in and remove the sludge. The liquid alone is taken up back into the tank where the aeration happens. There's an air compressor for which the aeration does. Secondary clarifier is pretty similar to the primary clarifier. And another process goes down. Again, here, activated sludge is brought in, a return sludge pump, where all the solids being removed off. So again, if you can see, there are 3 processes in which the sludge is removed. Finally, a disinfectant could be a chlorine added onto it and discharged to the surface water. This is also one easy example of for you to distribute what a waste treatment plant is. And we are pretty much come to the end. And here, as he said, the drainage lines for a house. So the general principle and designs of consideration for drainages always lay the sewer by the side of the building and not below the building. The reason is, if at all there needs to be any checks or anything needs to be repaired, it doesn't need to affect the building. Drain should be laid straight between inspection chamber and manholes. So that we look into. The entire system should be properly ventilated from starting point to the final point. The house drain should be connected to the public sewer only if the level permits. That is, the main sewer line, which should be on the road, needs to be at a lower level than the plot. If it's on the other way around, if the roads are higher and the plot sizes are lower, definitely there's going to be a reverse flow. So that's the intent here. House drains should have enough number of traps as suitable point for efficient functioning. Like last time we saw about what is the function of the traps. It traps the insects or any contents, any other foul gases from the main sewer to return back into the house. Joints of the sewer should be very tight. There should be a proper gradient. Materials of sewer should compare with the standards requirement. Rainwater should also be conserved for the stormwater drain. Sewage needs to be conveyed as early as possible. So this is one typical section of a sewer manual, which you see on the extreme. That's a manual on the road. A sewer lateral is where the house sewage is sent out, and then it's connected to the sewer main line, and then it goes to the downstream. The test for drainage pipes, whether the pipes are free of any leaks, what are the different tests? Air test, colored water test, hydraulic test, smell test, and smoke test. I'll give you this PPT, you can just have a quick reading on that. Maintenance of drainage. Drainage system needs to be clean and maintained at regular intervals for efficient functioning. Avoiding entry of undesirable elements. So the grids and the screen filters are quite essential. Proper flush required for proper working of house drainage. Proper flushing in the sense with needs of enough amount of water is required and enough amount of gradient also need to be given. Inspection is constant inspection of whether there's any clogs forming. The free flow water is checked regularly. Disinfectant should be used. That's it. Okay. Guys, I know it's quite a long session and it's a continuous session. You guys can ask me if at all there's anything which needs to be repeated, which you're not clear with. I can rephrase and explain it again. Which content is not, you guys are not clear with? Queries? Is everything clear from this explanation, or is there anything which needs to be repeated? Guys, what's your feedback? Any questions from the session?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, I'll share you this PPT in the study materials content. You can go through them. And if at all you have any questions, you can get back to me on the same.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Fine. I think with this, we'll wrap the session for today. Okay, guys. Thank you. Do mark your attendance in the GCR. If you're not marking there, then you'll be marked absent for today. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.